Hi, my name is Caitlin Roberts Donovan, and I am the Program Manager for Fellowships in Career Education at Wellesley. We had some technical issues when we did our live Fulbright presentation, so we thought it would be a good idea if we did a re-record, at least of the informational session, and the fabulous comments and advice from our alums and current and future Fulbrighters will be posted separately after this, but you will have access to both a complete info session and the wonderful advice provided afterwards. I am currently recording this from a house that has one rambunctious corgi, a 5-month-old baby, and 2 cats. So if you hear any background noise, I do apologize. But again, we're here to talk about the Fulbright US Student Program today as an info session to learn more about the program and get some myths busted. So away we go. So the COVID-19 pandemic is a very serious issue, obviously. This image is a very silly elephant. The point here, other than perhaps to lift your spirits on a rainy Monday with an image of a baby elephant enjoying a day on the beach, is that it's important to acknowledge that a lot is uncertain right now, and talking about a fellowship for international travel without acknowledging the global pandemic seems to ignore the proverbial elephant in the room. What is also true, though, is that even if there were no pandemic, we would be giving you the following advice: that it is never too early to start thinking about an application. Time spent thinking about your ideas, your goals, potential projects, and future plans is never time wasted. So even if there weren't a pandemic, we would be encouraging you to think about these things. And even if things were different, this is a great time to start thinking about this. Uncertainty is really hard, right? This little person in this image looks way more confident than I do on my best day. I know, as an art history student who graduated into a financial crisis, believe me, I know, that even with everything that's going on, it can still feel like you have to have everything figured out to even begin the fellowship or the Fulbright process. And that's the first myth that I want to bust: that everyone knows exactly what they're doing after graduation. Incorrect. In fact, the quiet majority of grads and undergrads do not have confirmed plans for after graduation, and especially given the current circumstances, many probably had plans that have since fallen through. So just to emphasize, you don't have to necessarily know what you're doing in order to start thinking about a fellowship. I have to have the next year or 5 years or however long of my life figured out to even think about applying. Wrong. You don't. In fact, putting together a fellowship application can help you sort through your ideas, goals, and priorities, and may help you articulate what you might want to do. It's really hard to just come out of sort of the blue saying, you know what, here is a perfectly articulate, put together proposal for the exact thing that I would like to do. That process takes a lot of thought and a lot of time. So you don't necessarily have to have a perfect plan going forward in order to start the process. If I don't apply for a fellowship as a senior, I'll miss out on all of the good opportunities. Wrong, fortunately. It's true that there are some opportunities for rising seniors only and for undergrads only. There are many, many more, including the Fulbright, that are open to you as an alumna. And remember, you have access to the career education team and resources for your whole life as an alum too. So that's a bonus. In addition to the possibility of getting a really cool opportunity with a fellowship, there's an upshot in that there is value in the process itself. Last year, we had an info session in which there were, I think, 6 people in the audience and 12 fabulous student speakers who had volunteered their time to come and give their advice. And these were folks who had won very prestigious fellowships, folks who had not won anything, had been awarded as alternates, who had come up with fabulous alternatives for themselves when some things didn't pan out. And to a person, they each said that there was value in the process because it helped them articulate what they were passionate about, what they might want to do in the world, how long they might want to do it, and where they thought it might take them. So take a chance. Also, please forgive the Cthulhu and Loch Ness Monster. The Loch Ness will see us through this presentation. So the Fulbright Program. What is the Fulbright Program? In a nutshell, the mission is to foster mutual understanding between nations, advance knowledge across communities, and improve lives around the world. Essentially, the Fulbright Program is an opportunity for you to become a citizen ambassador. Mutual understanding are really the watchwords here. After World War II, Congress had essentially a pot of money left over, and we decided that we wanted to make some friends abroad. To be perfectly clear, This is not cultural imperialism. We work very closely with our partners abroad to see what needs they have in country. So it's not as though we're sending people abroad to, say, teach English or do research because that's the American way. We do it because that's what they ask for. There are countries who would prefer to have lots of people coming and teaching English. There are countries that have lots of great research opportunities. So again, not cultural imperialism. Also, just so that you know, this is sponsored by the US State Department, which is a great way to travel abroad under the protection of the State Department. And it's administered by both US embassies and commissions. And in the US, by the Institute of International Education. So, Fulbright is actively recruiting a diverse pool of applicants for the Fulbright program. If you have this image in your mind of, say, like Joe College, the Fulbrighter, that's really not the case. There is no platonic ideal of a Fulbrighter. It could absolutely be you. So if you are, and if you think about it, there are lots of opportunities for you to represent who you are and where you come from to Fulbright. There's no single American experience, and Fulbright is really looking for a great diversity of people to go abroad and represent the United States. Eligibility. It is available to graduating seniors and recent grads and graduate students, although you cannot have a doctorate at the time of application, and early career professionals, including creative and performing artists and musicians. You must be a US citizen by the application deadline. If you are an international student, please do feel free to come talk to the fellowships team, because there are a lot of great opportunities for international students to do a travel fellowship. Unfortunately, the Fulbright is not one of them. And there are country-specific requirements. Something that you will hear me say time and time again is that it all depends with Fulbright. Now, what that means is that each country has its specific designations, right? Like there are some countries that may require language proficiency, and there are some that don't, but it really varies by country. The Fulbright website is a great resource for more information. So if you have questions about what country is looking for what, requires which qualifications, their website is a great place to start. Also, as a reminder, alumni can apply through the Wellesley Campus Committee, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Campus Committee in just a few minutes. But just as a reminder that alumni can apply through Wellesley even after they've graduated. And bonus fact, you will notice that there is no GPA requirement. Many students and alums come to me and they're very worried about their GPAs. They think they tell me that, oh, you know, I didn't have a 4.0, so there's no chance that I could get this. Truly, 100% hand on my heart truth. GPA is just one number, and it is one number amongst a variety of factors that are considered when you apply for a fellowship, the Fulbright or many others, right? Admittedly, there are a couple of fellowships that do have a minimum GPA requirement. The Fulbright and many others do not include a GPA requirement. And think about how that one number sort of stands up in regards to perhaps a really wonderful recommendation letter, or an amazing personal statement, or a statement of interest, right? So don't let a GPA necessarily get in your way when you're considering these things. Just a little pro tip. Program award types. There are basically two different types of Fulbright awards. The first is a study research grant, which can be independent study, research, or arts projects abroad. That can also include graduate study for a year abroad, and English teaching assistantships, which is exactly what it sounds like, where you help teach English and US culture in the classroom. Now, the classroom, quote unquote, can include a lot of variety, which is true of the Fulbright program. Some countries you would be teaching elementary school students, some countries you'd be teaching at a university level, and you could teach anywhere in between. You could be teaching in adult centers or summer camps or things like that. There are a lot of different types of situations, and I recommend that you check out, again, it all depends. You just check out the Fulbright website to see what countries offer which opportunities to teach. Actually, I'm going to go back really quickly. One other thing to think about, a lot of people like to try to play the numbers. So they think, oh, you know, for instance, Finland only had a certain number of applications last year. So maybe I should put in an application for Finland because it doesn't look like many people are interested. Unfortunately, a lot of people try to play that game too. So the numbers vary a lot from year to year. I think the most important thing is fit and feasibility, right? The idea that what you're proposing to do fits with what they're looking for, and that what you're proposing to do is feasible, right? It's better to play to your passions than to play to numbers. Just another pro tip. Award benefits, round-trip airfare, stipend, accident and sickness benefits, and an amazing Fulbright network of alums. There's actually an opportunity to look up the grantee directory on the Fulbright website. So you can see, for instance, you can look up by institutions and you can see where Wellesley grads have gone in the past. Application components. So what does it take to apply for a Fulbright? First, basic personal data. This is essentially just a form. Abstract, host country engagement, and future plans. Host country engagement basically just means that they're not looking for people who will do what they do in the classroom or in their lab or whatever, and then go back to their room and watch Netflix, right? They're interested in how you want to engage with the country. You don't have to necessarily set up some sort of discussion group, or if that's your thing, that's great. But, you know, would you start a running club, or would you take a cooking class or something like that? How would you engage with your host country? In terms of future plans, you don't have to have things set in stone. But with the Fulbright, as with many other fellowship applications, the folks who are reading it really want to understand how you're thinking of the Fulbright as part of a longer journey, right? How might the Fulbright help get you to the next step on your path? Essays, statement of grant purpose, which is 2 pages for a study research grant and 1 page for an English teaching assistantship, and a personal statement, which is 1 page max. And just as a reminder, Career Education does draft review and application review. So if you get us your drafts 24 hours ahead of time before an appointment or before virtual drop-ins, we'd be more than happy to look over and give feedback for your drafts. There may be a foreign language evaluation. You would need 3 references and the campus committee evaluation. So the campus committee evaluation is essentially the campus committee getting together and talking to you in a very informal interview. To be clear, the campus committee's job is not to nominate or decline your application. We will put forth your application no matter what. Our job is simply to help you put together the strongest application possible. We listen for things that may not have come through in the paper version of your application, things that you really just light up when you talk about in an interview. And those are the things that we capture in the campus committee evaluation that we also submit as part of your application, so that we can just give another amazing dimension to your already fabulous application. There are also transcripts required, and sometimes there are affiliation letters that you need if you're going to propose a program or a project with an institution abroad. And again, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of these application components. Factors in selection. I mentioned this before, the quality and feasibility of the proposal. So basically, fit and feasibility, right? There's no platonic ideal of a candidate who would get any fellowship that they applied for, right? It's about flexibility and seeing sort of if what you are proposing to do is feasible and lines up with what they want folks to do. Academic or professional record, personal qualifications, language prep. These are just sort of the basic building blocks that I think a lot of Wellesley students could make the case for. I mentioned this briefly before, but what slice of America do you represent? I personally grew up in the middle of a cornfield, and I've lived in Boston for 10 years, but I still refer to the brown bubbly liquid that comes in a can as pop. Thank you very much. But at a recent event, at a launch event, actually, one of the IIE staff mentioned that in some ways it might actually be an unexpected bonus for students to have to be home right now, since that might help you remember and reconnect with where you're from. Fulbright wants you to represent your America. They don't want to send over people who happen to be holding an American flag in one hand and an apple pie in the other. There are lots of different Americas, right? How are you representing one slice of it? How are you flexible? How are you adaptable? How would you make a great citizen ambassador? What sort of mutual understanding would you help create? And remember, not every country has a fluency requirement. So in regards to the language preparation, you might not need it. Okay, so the application timeline, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. April through September, which is right now, obviously, through September, design your project and prepare your application. Again, we are more than happy to review your drafts multiple times. I think my record for one application with a student is reading her drafts, I think about 11 times, and it was a pleasure. So thinking about your project, preparing your application, a fellowships application isn't really something that you can put together overnight, right? It's my colleague Kate Dalinger likes to say it's kind of like soup, right? You put vegetables in water and you got vegetables in water. But if you put vegetables in water and you put it on the back burner for a while, eventually you've got soup. Forgive the tortured metaphor, she says it better. On Thursday, July 30th, we have an optional draft deadline. What that means is that if you can get us your drafts by Thursday, July 30th, you will be guaranteed draft review during our busiest season of August and September, before the campus deadline. And that's a very busy season and it's very hard to get an appointment. But if you get us your drafts by that deadline, you're guaranteed an appointment. Now, a draft, that's a big word. Well, it's a short word, but it covers a lot of territory. A draft could be completed essays, it could be an outline, it could be a mind map. You just have to have something down, right? We're more than happy to work with whatever you've got. Monday, August 31st is the campus deadline. If you are applying through the campus committee, which we do encourage, but which is not required. If you apply through the campus deadline, you will be guaranteed an interview with the campus committee. And again, that's that campus committee evaluation where we talk to you and try to add another dimension to your application of the things that come through that might not have come through on your paper app. Tuesday, October 13th is the national deadline. You'll have the opportunity after your campus committee evaluation, after your campus interview, to incorporate our feedback into your application. So you'll have a chance to update and refine after we meet with you, and then submit by the national application deadline. November through December, your application is reviewed in the US by national screening committees. To be clear, if you are, for instance, applying to teach English in Russia, you will not be compared to, say, somebody doing a study research grant in Portugal. You'll be read apples to apples with other folks who are applying for English teaching assistantships in Russia, just to be clear. If your application is advanced, then that will happen in January or May to your host country for review. And then final selection and notification are made in March and June. Generally, folks know kind of like by May if they've been selected. Currently, obviously, with the global pandemic, things are a little bit hinky in terms of notification. It may be that the current winners, so the folks who have been awarded this year in 2020, it's confirmed that many of them will not start their Fulbright years until January of 2021. But right now, for those of you who are thinking about applying, we're still working with the application timeline that you see here. And again, I know it's a lot to ask people to be flexible. It seems like that's what everybody's asking everybody these days. But if you have any questions, please, please do not hesitate to ask us. This is how you would stay connected with the US student program. We will be posting the Fulbright info sessions on Handshake, so stay tuned. So check out that and stay tuned. There are a lot of great videos on the Fulbright website, sort of talking about lots of different folks who have done it. And just remember, we're here the whole year round to talk, brainstorm, review drafts, and help you put together the strongest proposal possible. In a lot of ways, getting together a Fulbright application can put you in a really good position to think about, future job applications or graduate school applications or other fellowship applications. The one thing that I can absolutely guarantee to you is that if you start a fellowship application, you will never be back at square one, right? You will have already done a lot of important thinking about what you want to do, what you might not want to do, when you want to do it, where you want to do it, and why. And that's never time wasted. Again, the refrain that our students keep telling us, and I promise they are not paid spokespeople, is that there is value in the process, right? Again, we are available at fellowships@wellesley.edu. Kate and I both do, Kate Dalinger and I, Caitlin Roberts-Donovan, can do appointments over the phone or over Zoom. My baby daughter River might join us sometimes for an appointment if necessary, but I can always put her down if not. And we're more than happy to talk and work through these things with you. Remember, Athena may have sprung fully formed from the head of Zeus. Applications for fellowships, including the Fulbright, do not spring fully formed from your head. If you have an idea, if you have a dream, if you have a project, then you might have the seed for a fellowship application, and we would love to help you build it. So keep in touch, be hopeful, take the shot, and let us know if you have any questions.
Why don't we have the speakers introduce themselves and like name, class year, what you did or what you just got awarded to do, and then we'll ask students who have questions, if you want either to unmute your microphone and ask a question live, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, just type something into the chat box and we'll open it up.
Excellent. Isabel, you wanna lead off?
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and start. So hi, everyone. My name is Isabel, and I graduated in 2017, so a couple of years ago, and I majored in Peace and Justice Studies and minored in Asian American Studies. So the grant that I kind of applied to and was accepted was the Fulbright Taiwan ETA, which stands for English Teaching Assistantship. So I think you're pretty familiar with that already. But I did that, so I went into that the fall of 2017, and I did that for 1 full year. And then I was very lucky. The Fulbright Taiwan program allows you to apply for a second year as an ETA, so I went ahead and did that. So I did that for 2 years, and then I moved on to something else. Yeah, so that's me.
What kind of classrooms were you in, Isabel?
Yeah, so in all of Taiwan, it's only in well, it really depends. The Taiwan program continues to grow every single year, adding new ETA positions all across the country. But a majority of the ETAs are placed in elementary schools. And it's usually 1 or even 2 elementary schools. And you'll kind of split the week up. Maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're at one school, and Tuesday, Thursday, you're another school. For me, I was at one kind of main school in a town or in a county called Hualien, which is on the east coast of Taiwan. And I did that 4 out of the 5 days of the week. And then on Wednesday, right in the middle of the week, I went to what was called English camp. So I would go to more rural schools in Hualien County and work with the kids there, which was a really wonderful opportunity and very different from the school that I was kind of my home base school, because that was a city school. And then suddenly I was going out into the country, you know, taking 2-3 hour train rides away, hour-long train rides, and so really got to see a different side of the country.
Fabulous, thank you.
Yeah.
Francesca, hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat, so let me know if you can't. But I graduated class of 2018, so not too long ago, and I majored in biology and Italian studies. And I ended up doing an open study research project in Italy last year. So I arrived at the end of September 2018 and returned home at the end of August. I stayed a little bit longer. The duration of the grant was 9 months. And in that time, the purpose of my project was to evaluate the bioethics of how the bodies of migrants and asylum seekers are retrieved, autopsied, and repatriated by Italian authorities. So it was a very specific project. It ended up working out really well for me. During my time at Wellesley, when I went abroad, I did not go to Italy, so didn't really achieve the fluency level that I wanted. And so that was kind of the reason I applied for Fulbright in the first place, was to have an opportunity to immerse myself in the language and the culture for some time after graduating. So that's how I found where I wanted to go to. The project evolved from that. I thought about what my career goals were and kind of built the project around that. It was convenient that, you know, Italy has this problem right now of migration and how it's being handled. And so that was like a natural spot for me to like fill in with my research project. But that's kind of how I figured things out. I'd be happy to answer more specific questions about that after. But yeah, that's the broad answer of what I did.
Fabulous. Sabrina, do you want to join us?
Yeah, hi, my name is Sabrina Beaver. I am a current senior, and I found out last week that I have been offered an ETA grant to teach English in Uzbekistan. I study international relations economics and Russian, and had some prior experience in the region, but there's some really interesting things going on in Uzbekistan, and I wanted the opportunity to kind of get to know some communities there, and really have the opportunity to really become involved in this extraordinarily interesting time for Uzbekistan.
Fantastic. So yeah, maybe Isabel or you, Sabrina, might want to talk about how you picked what countries you applied to go to, or what made you decide that teaching English was the right fit as opposed to applying for a study research grant.
Good question. I can go ahead and start. It is a good question. I think I was always kind of interested in the ETA program. I didn't really have a kind of burning research question in mind that I wanted to pursue. And so that kind of left the ETA program. And that one also was very interesting to me. I had a lot of kind of teaching background. I had taught a lot during my time at Wellesley, doing the China After School program and working for the China Child Study Center. And so that was something that I wanted to continue after college, and I wanted to do it in a new country and learn about a new education system. So that's why I was really interested in it. And then the reason I picked Taiwan was, well, I'm Chinese American, and I was very interested in kind of going back to East Asia and kind of exploring my roots. And unfortunately in China, they no longer have an ETA program. And so kind of Taiwan was the next best fit for me because they speak Chinese there, and I wanted to continue my language, build on my language skills. And also I kind of had never heard of Taiwan. I think a lot of news about Taiwan is kind of overshadowed by China. And so I was really interested in being in a country, again, so close to China, very kind of similar culture and history, but also very different.
And I know that in your second year, you work supporting new first-year ETAs.
Yes.
Does everybody have fluent Mandarin when they arrive in Taiwan? Does everybody have lots of teaching experience or have an interest in teaching long-term?
Great question. So last year when I was a mentor, there were 110, I believe, ETAs, and they were from all over the United States with all kinds of different backgrounds. Some were fluent in Chinese, some had never spoken a word of Chinese in their entire life. Some had had a lot of education, a kind of education background, either had taught previously. You know, there were many ETAs who had done Teach for America and then had come to do this program. And then you had some people who, you know, had never worked with kids before. So we had this whole range of people, but what all drew us together is that we were all interested in being together, being in a new place, learning a new culture, and really immersing ourselves in Taiwan. Mm-hmm.
Sabrina, you just did this. You were in one of these sessions a year ago. How did you decide what to apply for?
So I've studied Russian, and I knew like before graduate school, I wanted another immersive opportunity to like work on my Russian. And then it was just deciding, you know, where I wanted to go. I thought I wanted to teach English again. I had studied abroad in Kyrgyzstan and had been lucky enough to tutor writing and English there. And I found that it really helped me get to know the community where I was like living and studying. And I wanted the opportunity to do that again. And so then it was just like going through the different countries and kind of doing like a little cost benefit analysis. And like I mentioned, Uzbekistan is having this really interesting period. It's been like a pretty closed off country for like decades, and they recently got a new leader and are really kind of opening up. And so, you know, wanting to study Central Asia and Eurasia in the future, I thought it would be, you know, a really interesting opportunity to not only work on my language skills, but also to be able to really see on the ground the social, political, and economic changes that are happening.
Wow. I'm going to read one more question from the chat box, but folks, if you have questions, feel free either to type them into the chat box or unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, I have a whole slew of questions because there are a bunch of things I would love to get you folks to speak to. You know me, I never stop talking. It was really hard to sit on my hands and let Caitlin talk. That's not true. She does it beautifully. But the question from the chat is, what might research look like for non-STEM disciplines? And I know we have two ETA folks, and Francesca, yours was sort of science related, but you were working on bioethics. So it was in some, it's not like you were in a lab.
Yeah, so I spent my time working at the hospital that was local to where I was staying. And because of the Fulbright network in Italy, I was able to meet people who were doing non-STEM research. And that honestly looks like anything. The cool thing about Fulbright is that you make it your own, which is also a little terrifying because it's the first time in my life that nobody was telling me where to be, what to be doing in order to, execute my project. So I would say for non-STEM people, it can vary between, traveling around your country and going to different sites, talking to different people, spending time doing archival research. The best piece of advice I got during my Fulbright orientation was to just aim lower, which is kind of weird because, when I won my Fulbright, I was so passionate about my project and I was like, I'm gonna, revolutionize the world in these 9 months, which is just not realistic at all. And it's important to remember that as a Fulbrighter doing research, also as an ETA, but you are a cultural ambassador just as much as you are, an English teacher or a researcher. And it's important and encouraged to not spend all your time tucked away in a library or, traveling. They want you to talk to people. They want you to have experiences. And you can combine the two to make it really cool. I mean, I became very good friends with the people that I worked with and gained access to people, places, things within my host community that I would not have had access to otherwise had it not been for taking time away from my research and, just saying yes to things that, weren't what I thought I needed to be doing, I guess.
Some of those experiences turned out to be some of the most valuable and interesting ones, the things you're really glad you did.
Absolutely, yeah. So the best thing about the open study research, STEM or not STEM, is that you have the freedom to make it what you want. I don't know what it's like for other countries, but I will say that for Italy, there wasn't a ton of oversight and there were no deliverables, really. I mean, at the end of the year, we had a closing conference where we just presented on what our experience was like, but nobody was expecting me to, publish a New York Times bestseller on my research. Nobody was expecting really anything from me like that.
And that's a universal Fulbright experience, by the way.
Which, it's one of the most prestigious fellowships that you can get. And I definitely went into it thinking, a lot of people wanted this and I got it and I need to make the most of it. But I think that I did make the most of it in ways that I didn't expect to, which is the most important thing to take away. I hope that makes sense, but.
Yeah. And I will say, having worked now for 13 years with Fulbright, I've seen every imaginable kind of project, from long form journalism to somebody working with an artist to learn more about their art, to people doing archival research. In some cases, what you might have, affiliation is possible not only with, say, a scholar at a local university. So you might be doing either your own project with support from a local scholar, or you might be contributing to an ongoing research project that's happening at a research center or a local university. And that could be in any field that's relevant for you. Or it could be that you are doing something very different. In many countries, it's possible also to have multiple affiliations and potentially, for example, to do some volunteer work with a nonprofit. Leilani Stacy had a Fulbright to Portugal, and she was interested in female entrepreneurship. And so she had an affiliation with a local scholar at a local university, but she actually spent more time working with various nonprofits and a small government agency supporting, small businesses and women business owners and entrepreneurship and stuff. And so that's one of the really interesting things about Fulbright, is that it's very flexible. It's absolutely okay if you start this by saying, I have no idea what to do or how I'd make this work or how I would structure that year. Yeah. But that's definitely something that we can help you talk through as you're working on your project. To that end, we have some questions in the chat box. One is, so Francesca, how did you plan out and organize your research project? And how specific did you have to get in your project proposal, which, by the way, everybody, is 2 pages. So yeah, the answer is you can't get too detailed, but yeah, go ahead, Francesca.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time deleting things that I had originally written for my project proposal, just because grant writing is very specific, and I'd never done it before. So
we're always here to help everybody.
Kate was a huge help. So in terms of planning out and organizing my research project, the first thing that I did was decide what I was interested in and how I could kind of mold the current situation to fit what I wanted to get out of it. I saw that there was an issue that I was interested in, which was like this bioethical issue. And I didn't really necessarily make it out to be this like 9-month plan. The way that I proposed it was, this is my research question. This is the person that I'm going to be working with. I had an affiliate that I had to find, which I'd be happy to answer more questions on if people have questions about that. But my research question was like, you know, what are the bioethics of the situation? And beyond that, I just outlined how I was going to go about answering that question. I didn't say I'm going to spend, 4 months on this or a week on that. I just said like, this is the person I'm working with. This is how I'm going to contribute to her lab, an American contributing to an Italian, and this is how this Italian is going to contribute to me, an American citizen. And I think that was the most important point to get across. This is learn from each other and help each other with. And then filled in the rest of the time with volunteering opportunities or, things that I was interested in, with the end goal being that, I said that I wanted to publish some journal, like peer-reviewed journal authorship publications, and start writing, a book, which, might happen, might not. I have more time with this quarantine, so who knows? But there was no set timeline that I gave them, and they were totally okay with that. In terms of Jane's question, so I drafted my grant proposal and had it submitted to Kate during like the first deadline. So I wrote it in the summer of 2017. I did not get to Italy until like a year and some months later. And by the time I got there, my professor, the affiliate that I was working with, basically forgot who I was. And the situation in Italy had entirely changed. They were not letting migrants into the country anymore. So it changed the nature of my project, which was pretty scary at first, because I felt like I was supposed to be doing one thing and I couldn't do it anymore. But it also like created new space to let my project evolve in new ways to suit the needs of the people I was working with. I don't think that's true for everyone. I think that some people like have a pretty solid plan that they go in and do. That tends
I'll say that's rare.
It's very rare. I mean, I had a friend who was actually in the same geographic location as me, and she was working with, one of the affiliated open project things. And, she reported somewhere every day. She had specific research she was working on. She did what she expected to do. But for the open study people, I don't think that was the case at all. So
I open it up more broadly, and I want to ask everybody to think about what might you say to encourage somebody who's sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. I couldn't do this, or even if I did it, they'd never pick me. Before we get to that, Francesca, can I ask you to speak a little bit about like, how do you even find somebody to affiliate with? What is affiliation in Fulbright terms, and like, how scary is that?
It's a little scary. It's intimidating because one of the components for my project was to have an affiliate, to have someone say like, we are going to be your point person in this country for your research. For me, that meant having a letter from someone saying that. I don't think that's true for every country. I'm not certain, but once I decided what I wanted my project to look like, I just started like cold emailing a bunch of people. I, Googled professors, I Googled like nonprofit organizations in like the geographic location that I was interested in, to see who was working on work that was similar to what I wanted to be doing. I got some emails back. I probably sent out like 50 to 60, and that's how I was able to like get connected. I know other people will have connections through like professors or past internships, things like that.
Study abroad,
it really varies. But it is like a matter of putting pride aside and just like throwing something out there and seeing if it sticks.
And often I think you're offering yourself as free labor, which, you know, is kind of a nice, it's an easier ask. Like if Fulbright were to pay me, could I be useful to you? Is not such a terrible question to ask.
Exactly. And, you know, I was very mindful of the fact that, you know, the people I was emailing are busy and probably don't have time to sift through like back and forth. So I just said flat out, like, if I'm funded and want to do this research, would you be interested in collaborating? And framed it very much from the standpoint that like this would be something that they would be involved in, but there was like no real strings attached. They didn't have to be overseeing everything. And people's experiences with their affiliates varies greatly. I mean, I was in an office in a hospital every day with mine. That is not normal. Some people, you know, will get to their country and find that their affiliate doesn't even live in country anymore. So it really depends.
Flexibility, a skill we're all practicing a lot right now, is really helpful for Fulbrighters. Thank you so much, Francesca. That was really helpful. Sabrina and Isabel, what might you say to encourage people? And then I'll come back to you, Francesca, too. Or what do you wish somebody'd said to you? Or what did somebody say to you that made you take the leap and try?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at like the website, it's really intimidating because you see like all these different components. But when you really start working at it, it's just like a bunch of little pieces that like if you like start on it early will all come together. And then I think I submitted everything for the first deadline and then had a meeting with the fellowships and professors, and something that they said to me in that meeting was like, don't be afraid to like let like your inner like joy come through. And I think like that was really what was important for me in applying to Uzbekistan was like passion. And I think something in my application that was maybe a weak point was I was like almost too professional and almost too like, I'm going to do this and this and this. And at some point they were just like, you know, when we talk to you, like, it's clear that like you love this and you're excited about it. And like, you need to let that come through too. Cause like, we're happy you're prepared. We're happy that you like have checked all these boxes, but like, we want the excitement and the passion that you have to be felt by like the people reading this application, by your recommenders, and by eventually, hopefully the people you'll be teaching and interacting with on the ground.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely want to echo that. I definitely think that in your application, your kind of passion and your interest for the country that you're applying for is so important. It's been a while since I applied to Fulbright, so I don't really remember the kind of application process, except that it took a very long time to hear back. But I was very lucky my second year, so just last year, I actually got to help a little bit with the application process. So I read a few essays, and they have so you kind of know it's a two-part stage. It first kind of goes through IEE, I think, or IIE.
Screening committees. Yeah.
Right, a screening committee, and then it goes to the country, and then the people in the country read it. And a lot of people in the country read it. It's not just one person. They have, you know, I mean, I would say it's like a team of 20 to 25 people, and each person reads, you know, I don't know, they all read all different essays. But I think what stuck out to me most during that kind of process of reading them is that, you know, the people reading them are Taiwanese people. They are experts of their country. So if you say something in your essay that's, you know, just make sure you do the research and make sure that what you're saying, you know, can be read by a local and can be understood by that local person.
That dual audience is so important.
Yeah, that dual audience is so important because you're both writing to, you know, the kind of screening committee in the beginning who might be more, you know, American, and then you're writing to kind of the local community that you'll be kind of living in. And so being able to balance that is difficult, but certainly something to keep in mind.
Yeah. What might you say, Francesca, or what encouraged you to take the leap and try? Did you imagine before you applied, absolutely, this will be a breeze, no worries, I'll get this?
Oh my God, no, not at all. I, you know, was freaking out the whole time. One piece of advice I will give is do not join Slack groups. Grad Cafe is evil. Like, it is so anxiety inducing and awful. So that's a big no. But, you know, my aunt was the person, she's a professor at another college and teaches Italian. And she was really the one that said, like, why are you going to get a job after school if you have opportunities like this? You know, give it a shot and see if it sticks, because what's better than, you know, living fully funded in another country doing something that you care about. So it took a little while to get used to the idea, because I think during my time at Wellesley, I was very much like, this is my plan, these are my steps. And then Fulbright changed all of that for the better. I would say that, you know, I've talked to a decent number of people who are interested in applying, and something that comes up often is, you know, talking about Fulbright in terms of statistics, like which country is statistically the easiest to get accepted to, you know, what's easier to get into ETA or, you know, open study. And I think that is like the entirely wrong approach to take to applying to Fulbright. I would not have done my application any differently, because I applied to a country that, you know, is competitive, as are like both of your country. They're all competitive, you know, in one way or another. There was a really good chance that I was not going to get open study, because, you know, especially in my cohort, I would say 95% of the people were PhD students doing like a year of research abroad. But, you know, the difference was, all things aside, I just focused on what I was passionate about and what I cared about, and honestly became obsessed with writing my application. Like, I just enjoyed it so much because it was something that I believed in and wanted to do. And GPA, extracurriculars, everything else aside, I think that was the most important thing in getting the Fulbright, was demonstrating to, you know, the American side of things and also the Italian side of things that I was the person to do my project, and like demonstrated why. So that would just be like my biggest piece of advice to everyone, is like, go with your gut and what you want to be doing, rather than, you know, trying to strategize to be a Fulbrighter.
That's great advice. Yeah. I am mindful of the time. You guys are amazing, you've been very generous with your time, and I don't want to impose on you terribly. I'm happy to stay on if you want to keep talking a little bit. I'm not seeing new questions come in. We haven't talked about, like, how do you ask for letters of reference or for references, or any advice about that. I know often that's something that makes people worry about applying for a fellowship or scholarship. And so if you have some time, I'd love to talk about that, at least briefly. Any tips about who do you ask for references and how do you do that in the best possible way? And by the way, Caitlin and I are always glad to strategize with people about choice of program, country, recommenders, you name it.
Right. I can go first if...
Yeah, go ahead. I'm trying to remember.
I kind of had like a holy trinity in mind when I was going about asking for recommendation letters. I wanted someone who could advocate for my knowledge of the culture and language, which was, you know, my Italian professor at Wellesley. I wanted someone who could speak to my ability to do scientific research, which was, you know, a PI that I had prior. And then I wanted someone who could speak to my ability to like think critically about bioethical issues. A really important point that Kate had brought up to me during my my Wellesley, you know, meeting, I forget the name of it exactly, but when I was
interview.
Yeah, a point that was brought up, that I didn't have actual like coursework or like practical experience doing bioethics research, and how can I demonstrate to the committee that I'm qualified to be doing that? And I had somebody from a study abroad program that I did who could speak to that and my ability to do that. So I tried to cover all aspects of my project proposal that could be called into question, and like tried to bring in people who could, you know, leave no question unanswered.
And you obviously did a beautiful job of it.
Thanks.
I will point out that references for the study research grants are actually letters for the English teaching assistantships. It's a form that people have to fill out. And that might be a good segue to either Isabel or Sabrina to talk about, gosh, how do you even pick who to ask? And then what are tips for asking? Asking people for references can be scary.
Yeah. Oh, it was so hard. I don't think I did it as well as Francesca did, really kind of thinking about kind of each thing. I ended up just asking 3 of my favorite Wellesley professors who I had gotten to know really, really well over my 3 years. At that point, I was a junior at Wellesley, and who you know, knew me both, you know, personally, but also as a student, and knew that I was really interested in living in Taiwan and really interested in teaching, but also knew me, you know, just being a curious person who wanted to explore new things and was flexible and was, you know, up for a challenge. Of course, I've heard, you know, other people, they'll ask maybe 2 professors and maybe another mentor, or if they've done some sort of summer internship or another kind of teaching experience, they might ask those people for letters of recommendation. But I think at the end of the day, for letters of recommendation, you know, find the people who you know will support you the most, you know, who will, you know, who are there for you and who want you to succeed and who want you to thrive and who want you to have this experience. So that's the most important for me, or was for me. And then, you know, send them as early as you can. Get them, you know, tell your professors as soon as you can, as soon as you've kind of decided, yes, I'm going to do this, let them know and send them any kind of additional information. I think I remember sending them a draft of my personal statement and my statement of purpose, so they could just see why I was interested and know a little bit about the details for my application,
That's
I think
fantastic.
similarly to Francesca, I kind of like strategized a little bit because I think there are multiple sides of yourself you want to show off in your application. And I knew that going in to the specific grant I was applying for, like flexibility and the ability to adapt was going to be a huge part of like a successful application. And so I wanted people who could speak to like my passion for Russian language and for Central Asia, but could also speak to like my previous experience, like not only teaching, but in adapting to kind of adverse situations. So I had like a professor I'd worked for at Wellesley. I had someone I had worked for when I was in Kyrgyzstan. And then the last person was my supervisor the summer before from Kazakhstan. And like when I talked to him about like writing or filling out the form, I was like, you know, like I know like I worked on like political and economic research for you, but like what I want from this form is I'm hoping you can speak to like my ability to be placed in rural Kazakhstan and to like take what's there and to run with it. And he was like, absolutely. And so I think like you want people who can speak to like the passion, the experience, but also just like if you're in somewhere and like something complexity as you're an individual and your ability to kind of deal with situations on the ground, because like I think as like Francesca talked about, like wherever you are, like it's not going to be exactly as you have like micro planned in the months leading up to it,
Even without a pandemic.
exactly.
Absolutely. That was so, so helpful, all of you. And again, we're so happy to help you brainstorm. And if you're worried about asking for references, I have actually literally role played like, okay, I'm Professor X, or I'm your boss from your summer internship. Let's practice that phone call or whatever it is. You don't have to have a plan. You can start by asking people for advice. Like, you know what? I really enjoyed that class I took with you, or that research project, or whatever it was. And I'm thinking about applying for this. What do you think? What should I be thinking about? Do you think this is a good idea? Like, let's talk about that. Wellesley faculty members love to hear about the things that you're curious about, the things that you are hoping for, your interests outside the class. They love talking about like the work that they're doing with you, but they also love getting to know you as people. And so like engaging them in this process, you can just start by having conversations with people. And if you're really lucky, especially with Wellesley faculty being smart as they come, they'll say, so Sabrina, that's really interesting. Do you need me to write a letter for you? Well, and you don't even have to ask. So I think don't be shy about that. There are all kinds of ways to manage that, and all kinds of ways through all the various pieces of the application to showcase all of the various gifts and transferable experiences and passions and everything else that you bring to the table. Each Fulbright applicant I've worked with, each Fulbrighter I've worked with who's gotten the award has brought different things to the table, and their applications look really differently as a result. The idea is to be the best and most authentic version of yourself in the application, which is part of why, you heard people talking about talking to folks who knew them well and could speak to various aspects of what they brought to the table. I'm really happy to help you think about how that works. Thank you all for going over time and for offering such brilliant advice. It is such a pleasure to speak with you, and to all of you for listening in. I know we're all very busy, and I can't wait to talk with all of you. Caitlin and I can't wait to talk with all of you about your ideas about Fulbright and your dreams and aspirations. Such a pleasure. Follow up, email questions to fellowships@wellesley.edu, book an appointment via handshake. We'd love to talk, and all of you take care. Isabel, Francesca, how wonderful to see you again and to hear that it was a good year. Sabrina, I'm so excited for the adventure ahead. Take care, everybody.